Our theme for this week is equality. And actually, it seemed like a good place to start was this gentleman here, Colin Kaepernick, wearing the number 7 jersey for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, as an American footballer, he was a quarterback, and he came perilously close to winning the Super Bowl for them when he threw that pass to Michael Crabtree, which was just out of the wide receiver's reach. But it isn't for that, of course, that he's remembered. It's for what he's doing on this photograph. It's for taking a knee. Now, in American sport, the national anthem is played at the start of games, and the expectation is that you stand, often with your hand over your heart, and you sing the words and you join in proudly, words which embody what it means to be an American, words which talk about and unite people within that great nation. But Kaepernick wouldn't do that. He's joined here by his friend Eric Reed, taking a knee while the anthem plays. And for his stand, he got a huge amount of abuse. He would get booed by crowds. He would get threats. Even the president himself of the country said he should be fired. He was eventually dropped and hasn't played for a team since. But he stood by his convictions. He wouldn't give in, even though it meant the end of his career, or at least the temporary end. There's some talk that he may be coming back. He lost out on a huge amount of earnings because he believed something was so important, because he believed there was inequality in America, there was unfairness in America, that society wasn't as it should be, that there was inherent inbuilt racism within society, and that people from ethnic minorities and people just because of the colour of their skin were treated badly, were treated differently, were not given the same amount of respect as others. And he was willing to stand up for that, even if it meant losing everything else. In many ways, he was inspired by these two gentlemen. This is the 1968 Olympics, what is known as the Black Power protest. Tommy Smith and John Carlos each took a glove and raised their hands during the anthem. Again, that's a protest because of the divisions in American society at the time, where people, because of the colour of their skin, were not allowed to vote, or were not allowed to go into the same shops or the same schools as white people. Simply because of the colour of their skin, they were treated badly and they were treated as inferior. I don't know if you've been watching sport recently, but you'll see at the start of every football game, sportsmen taking a knee. And in some cases, like Marcus Rashford here, raising an arm. Why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that for the same reasons that Tommy Smith and John Carlos protested. They're doing that for the same reasons that Colin Kaepernick protested, because we've seen time and time again the unfairness, the inequality, the treatment of people as being different, as being not as important in society, simply because they have a different colour skin or come from a different ethnic minority group. They're standing up for the campaign that Black Lives Matters. And this is a campaign that goes around the world. We can't just look at America and say, oh, these things happen in America, but they don't happen here. Daily, we're hearing stories how people are discriminated against because of their race or ethnicity in our own society. And people like Marcus Rashford and people like Colin Kaepernick are saying, actually, enough is enough. We need to do something about it. I suppose the great sadness is that this image, as I said, was taken in 1968. And yes, we could say that quite a lot has changed. But actually, these problems are still here. Over 50 years later, we still haven't solved these problems in society. And of course, Marcus Rashford is a really great example, because it isn't just about racism that he's campaigned. Recently, he was on the news because he stood up for children from disadvantaged backgrounds who weren't going to get free school meals over the summer. Now, that might seem a really odd thing for a footballer to campaign about, free school meals. But actually, he shared some of the difficulties he'd had growing up. And he shared what it was like to be hungry, what it was like to have very little money. And actually, he wanted to open people's eyes. People like you and I, who may never have really understood what it is like to go hungry on a daily basis. He wanted to open our eyes to actually the plight and suffering of people within our own country, within our own society, the inequality, the unfairness, that some people don't have enough food to get through the day. And of course, he managed to change the government's position on it. But not every campaign is as successful. I don't expect you to know these gentlemen. I don't know them myself. But they're carrying a coffin. And that coffin is of a man called Brian Waswa. And he lived in Uganda. And he was murdered in his own house. Murdered because he stood up for the rights of gay people, people from the LGBTQ plus community in Uganda. He said they should be treated equally. They should be treated fairly. They should be treated like everyone else and not be discriminated against. And someone, we don't know who, took exception to this and killed him for these views. It can be very dangerous to stand up sometimes. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Our story from the Bible for this week is a bit of a strange story. It's about some workers in a vineyard. Jesus is telling this as a story, a parable. And some people start work at the start of the day and they're promised the basic pay for a day. Some people start work halfway through the day and they're promised the same pay. And some people start work later on in the day and they're promised the same pay. And they all get paid the same, even though some have worked for much longer than others. And of course, those that started the day are really unhappy. We worked for 8 hours and yet we're getting paid the same as those just worked for 2 hours. That's not fair. Now, Jesus wasn't actually getting into the wages of workers at this point. He was making a point that actually everybody is equal. And the fair thing to do is to treat everyone as equal, not think, well, actually, I've worked longer, therefore I'm better. Or I worked harder, therefore I'm better. Or I did the more important job, therefore I'm better. Everybody is equal in the eyes of God. Everybody. The Bible tells us we are all children of God. We are all precious to Him. Not just some people, not just people from one particular background, one particular race, or one particular religion, or one particular gender or sexuality. Everyone. Everyone is precious and equal in the eyes of God. The question we've got to ask ourselves is, how do we respond to this? Because too often, throughout history and in our current society, we don't treat people as equals. We treat people as being different. We look down on them. We think we're better than other people. Or sometimes we just don't do anything. We want to believe everyone's equal. We want to believe that everybody's valued. But we also just want to get on with our daily lives and not really think about it. Sometimes we just look the other way. And our inactivity can be just as harmful as our activity. When we fail to stand up for people who have been discriminated against, who have been treated differently, who have been treated badly, simply because they're slightly different to others. We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to make sure that what we're doing is being kind to everyone. It's being caring to everyone. It's being loving to everyone. The Bible tells us, and Jesus tells us, that the greatest commandments to love God and to love our neighbour as ourselves. And of course, that story comes alongside the Good Samaritan, which is a story about treating people from different races and different backgrounds with respect and not thinking, they're our enemies, we're not going to care about them. I have to hold my hands up and say, there were times in my life when I haven't treated everyone with the same respect as I should have done. When perhaps I've thought I'm better than someone. When perhaps I've looked down on someone else. I've thought I'm harder working than someone. I'm more deserving than someone. But actually, we need to remember this parable of the vineyard. That in God's eyes, we are all equal. No one's better. No one's worse. We are all equally precious. And so our challenge really is to make sure that as a school community, that we are doing that we are not making fun of people or excluding people or ignoring any problems that we see where people are being discriminated against. This is so important. We need to make sure that as a school, this is essential to who we are. A school that believes everyone is equal and uniquely precious.